Our next speaker this morning. Lana Frado is the Executive Director of Sound Times, and Sound Times is a large, multi-service consumer survivor initiative offering social, support, educational activities, services for those at risk of coming into contact or in conflict with the justice system, and harm reduction. She has served on many planning and policy initiatives, as well as having been involved in many survivor initiatives. She is currently president of the board of directors of the Arch Center for Disability Law. We're very happy.
That's old.
Oh. She was president of the board of directors, where she served with great distinction. And we're very happy to have her with us this morning. Lana.
So I had prepared something, but I think I'll toss that out the window. So most of you don't know that most of you would figure out I never started out to work in healthcare. However, what most of you don't know is the first piece of work I did that would be considered quasi-healthcare was that I wrote manuals for school boards across the country, helping them to integrate and reintegrate children who'd been treated for cancer or who were being treated for cancer back into the school system. And in working on that, I sort of married up my ideas around accommodation, disability accommodation, other kinds of accommodations, with some work I was doing in critical theory. These days, I have occasion to come into contact with many breathless recent graduates from social work school, and they lecture me about the intersectionality of oppression. I don't know exactly what kind of critical theory they're teaching in school these days. However, it doesn't appear to me to be very critical. The first problem with the way they sell me on the idea of the intersectionality of oppression is that the locus of the oppression is very much essentialist. The oppression is located in what the person is. That's not my understanding of oppression. And we as healthcare providers, which is institutional healthcare providers, we have to think about how we participate in those mechanisms of oppression. There is nothing inherently wrong with having a mental health issue, with being short, with being first-generation Canadian, with having eye problems or any of the other things that I have essentially wrong with me. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. My difficulty lies in when I come up against various institutions that were set up to service me, whether it's the educational system, whether it's the healthcare system. That is the locus of oppression. And what I find is that we as healthcare providers are not willing to talk about where we locate individuals in that matrix. So what ends up happening is we slide over, very politely, into a conversation where people are the problem rather than people have problems. What do we do about this problem, or that problem, or this group, or that group? So, after I worked with children with cancer, the question was posed to me in terms of another research project. If the ramp represents access for individuals with a mobility impairment, what does the ramp look like for individuals with a psychiatric disability? And I was supposed to provide tips and tricks for people to address this issue. And that was in 1991, maybe. Today, I'm supposed to provide tips and tricks, right, for individuals with social disabilities accessing healthcare. So you could see that from 1991 to where we are now, I'm a bit tired of talking about this. So I thought that I would discuss with you how there really are no, you cannot anticipate, for the individuals that I'm talking about, individuals who are marginalized, who are vulnerable, who are pretty much excluded from participating in most of the what we would consider accessible daily activities that we all participate in. For those individuals, there are no tips and tricks. What this means is we are going to have to rethink entirely the way that we approach our services. Now, I know lots of people talk about that, but how do we put that into practice? So we look at things like, and this includes our funders. So when we look at things like the dreaded administration budget, oh wow, this is movable. The dreaded administration costs of our organization, which, depending who you talk to, are supposed to be kept between 10 and 20%. It may be that we have to rethink that, and not all administration costs are waste, because some administration costs can be used to make our services more accessible to individuals who are not accessing them. That's something we can do on a policy level. When we look at physical accessibility for individuals who are using healthcare services, we can cite statistics like, I looked at some stuff coming out of McMaster, 15% of examination tables in the province are accessible. We can easily fix that. And I spoke to some people at Arch yesterday who said that one of the biggest complaints that they get is the inaccessibility of doctors' offices and their examination tables. That is easily fixed. So some of these things are easily fixed. Other things are not easily fixed because they require creative thinking on our part and a different way of doing things. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of examples of radical health equity activities we've undertaken at work to ensure that people get access to certain things they were entitled to. So I will use the example of the lawsuit that was settled for users of the pharmaceutical Zyprexa. There was a class action suit, and individuals who used Zyprexa in a certain period of time were entitled to a cash settlement because they had developed type 2 diabetes. The individuals who use the services at Sound Times, 70% of them are homeless. Many of them have other cognitive disabilities, intellectual disabilities. They're struggling with chronic health problems. And being the activist that I am, I was applauding the settlement of the Zyprexa lawsuit, but I thought immediately, how are the people that I'm servicing ever going to access this process? What we did was we partnered with the law school at York University, and we assigned a law student to a worker at Sound Times, and we held a mass advocacy clinic. One day, we processed a couple hundred people to access the information that they needed to access to help them fill out the forms. It took one day, and out of that process, approximately 120 people received the settlement. People who otherwise would not know about it, who would have difficulty qualifying for it, who would not have anyone to assist them through the process. And that was a one-off process. And it required a little bit of follow-up. It didn't it cost almost nothing as far as the agency goes. But the benefits that the individuals who received the funding reaped, some of them blew the money, but for many of them, they were able to move first and last month's rent. They were able to better furnish the places that they were living. There were many, many things that came out of the money because we followed the clients. For us, this is how we approach equity. We look for opportunities to disrupt the status quo, to disrupt the narrative. And that's the important piece. When it comes to equity, there's no point in having a shopping list of this is what you do to accommodate this group, this is what you do, blah, blah, blah. The onus is on us who have power and privilege to look for those opportunities to cause a disruption in the way we conduct our business. And that's what I would like to leave you with, most of all, rather than a shopping list of, don't shove forms at people as they come into your office without asking them if they have trouble filling it out and those guys. And, I have to take an aside here. I recently entered into the hellish world of neuro-ophthalmology. Now, many of the clients at Sound Times also have these very specialized health problems that require very specialized services, and they abandon treatment more often than not. And now, this is the first time I've had to navigate my way through a very specialized service, and I have to tell you, I completely understand why they do that. Over in neuro-ophthalmology, they make no bones about it, they accommodate no one. They care about nothing related to your physical or mental well-being. And so I bring that up because we as more progressive healthcare providers, we as individuals who are more generalist, who are taking a broader social determinants perspective of health, it is incumbent on us to look for those opportunities, because to sit around and wait for neuro-ophthalmology to change, I'm not really holding my breath. But where are the opportunities for us to intervene and cause a rupture in the system that makes everyone stop and think, hey, we could have done something like that, that makes people pick up the phone and call you and say, how did you do that? Or we want to do something similar to that. It's good that we have long-term plans, it's good that we have roadmaps, it's good that we have policy, but I'm a far more action-oriented person, and I feel that those of us who are in these positions of leadership, we do have a responsibility to look for those opportunities, to share those opportunities, and to provide those opportunities for our clients. Am I done?
I have to tell you something about Lana. Lana terrifies me and excites me so much because the first time I met Lana, she talked to an entire room of people about everything that we needed to do differently when we were thinking about our roles in the system. And it was fierce. And when I thought about who would come today to talk to us about what we could do differently in the system, Lana came to mind first. She is sort of the quintessential speak truth to power at any opportunity. And so I wanted to...
Not really. I really never tell you people what I really think.
I'll tell you. I'm not sure that's totally... When I called Lana, I said...
actually being very diplomatic.
When I called Lana to ask her to speak, I said, listen,
You want to
Lana,
know what I said when they called? Where's that guy that called me? I'll tell you what I said. 10 minutes to talk about including people with social disabilities in healthcare. I might as well get up there and teach everyone to make gnocchi. At least they will have gone home having learned something useful. That's what I said.
When I called Lana, I started off the conversation. I said, Lana, I want you to come and talk to us about what we need to do differently in the health equity space. She said, well, let me start with the Lynn. And I was like, fantastic. But I just wanted to thank you for being a very honest voice in the room. And also to put on the table that this afternoon is about doing that exactly. So challenge us and push us and remind us that we have an obligation to do things really radically different, because we have a group of leaders in the room here that don't need to be convinced that this is the right thing. We need to be, I think, told how we can proceed with that in very tangible ways. So I wanted to just thank you, specifically, Lana, for the role that you play at these tables.
Thank you, Sophie. So we're going to take some questions.
Oh, okay.
And they're going to be tough, challenging, impolite questions, because as Canadians, we're often inclined to be very cautious and polite, and you have demonstrated such courage. Let's Let's ask the tough stuff. Go for it.
Yeah. I'm trying to see you.
Too short, very difficult to see me. But my name is Ekem. I'm working at the Access Alliance. I'm the manager quality. I actually enjoyed your speaking from the heart, and I appreciate your approach to make a change, though the small, maybe small steps. So one thing I have in my mind when I was enjoying your deliberation, that can we make the employee equitable to the client? Like, can we, during the hiring process, we can hire people who reflect the clients that we serve. Like 70% of our clients are homeless. If in your center we can have some homeless people, so then they reflect the client, they understand the social determinant of health. There's the suggestion, and that's my query, so that we can follow that model at our CSC. Thank you very much.
So you can do it. Where I work, we only hire, we have an affirmative hiring policy, and we only hire people who have used mental health and addiction services. So, and many of us, myself included, have experienced homelessness and assorted systems. I've been on social assistance, et cetera, as have all my staff. And so I wouldn't argue that our approach is the only approach, but it does offer an alternative to individuals who haven't been able to access services through the sort of standard mechanism. So for us, we understand, for example, that appointment-based services are not going to work for a whole variety of reasons. So we have tweaked and retweaked our model to provide access to individuals, even though we have people who perform what would be considered a standard case management function, although we don't use that term, right? We have tweaked and retweaked our model to ensure that individuals who will not show up for a case management appointment, or who will definitely not meet their case manager at the Tim Hortons because they won't remember or they won't have a buzzer or whatever it is, that they have an alternative. And so it is possible to create organizations that have enough individuals with lived experience. I know lived experience is now a shorthand for mental health problems, but lived experience of anything, right? You know, it is possible to create organizations where those individuals are informing. Not only, it's not about getting client feedback, and it's not about surveys and sham consultations and all the rest of it. It is about integrating people who are marginalized or were formerly marginalized right into the power structures of the healthcare system to enable us to provide better service. It's not pure support.
All right, we have two more questions, one here.
Well, it's not really a question. Hi, Lana and Sandra. You and I have met before, but it's more of a challenge. I just wish, and I'll take my hat off as the ED of my center and put my hat on as a person with lived experience of disability, and simply say that I just wish everybody in the room would listen to what people were saying. I've had so many experiences where, for example, my sister recently went through the healthcare system, and after about the 4th or 5th visit with her doctor, they finally started listening to her about the fact that she was concerned about having surgery and having a respiratory problem. So it's really simple, folks. All you have to do is listen. Actively listen. Thank you.
I've got another question here.
Lana, can you say something about housing and the long housing waiting lists and a new way maybe to make those smaller?
Well, I know everybody has recovery oriented all over their website, but to truly be recovery oriented, you need to understand that not everybody needs the same level of service for the rest of their life all the time. The problem with the way we've set up housing is that we've built in a financial incentive to stay in need of support. So if you understand the nature of mental health and substance use issues, which is my area of expertise, but you will understand that that's a cyclical process. And people move in and out of periods of ability and disability. Many people. Some people no. Some people will need high support housing for a very long time. But there are many people that don't leave their supportive housing units, not because they're in need of support at the moment, it's because they know they won't get it if they need it in the future. And they are in those units for economic reasons. We know that. We know that. So we know all of this. We have graphs. I go to all those horrible committees, and I'm on one committee that sits around and pisses and moans about how we measure quality. We've been talking about that for 2 years. We know all of these things, except we don't have any mechanisms in the system to change it. Either the funding criteria is too restrictive, agencies get married to ideologies that they're not willing to rethink or give up. We have a number of those systemic barriers to doing it, but we do know for certain, and I know, anecdotally, but I have like 25 years of anecdotes, so that should have some statistical basis, I think. But anyway, anecdotally, that individuals do want to leave their supportive housing. And interestingly enough, because we hire individuals with mental health and addiction issues, when we hire them, many of them are coming out of supportive housing. And I'm always fascinated by the process by which you get into supportive housing, and I'm actually more fascinated by the process by which people help you get out, which I can tell you there's not as much energy put into that at the back end as there is at the front end.
All right, we're going to hold it there. Lana, thank you
Can I
very
go?
much
Yeah.
for joining us this morning.